The first time I called someone in the middle of the night because my wife needed help, I was 26, and it was a doctor. The second time, I was 38, and it was my own brother. That's not a coincidence. That's 12 years of assuming family meant something specific, and one Tuesday night that finally told me exactly how specific. A week later, that same brother walked onto my job site in front of my entire crew, hard hat rules ignored, my foreman watching the whole thing unfold, and by then there wasn't a single thing left for either of us to pretend hadn't already happened. Welcome to Beyond Family Lies. If this is your first time here, get comfortable, because this one earns every minute of your time. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into it. My name is Ethan Marsh. I'm 38 years old. I run site supervision for a commercial construction outfit out of Fort Wayne, which means I spend most of my days making sure 40 different subcontractors don't kill each other or themselves before a building's finished. My foreman Marcus had been with me on that same job site for going on 4 years, long enough that he could read my mood off the set of my shoulders before I'd said a word some mornings. Tuesday had been a long one, an inspection that ran late, a subcontractor who showed up short-handed, Marcus and I staying an extra 90 minutes just to keep Friday's schedule intact. By the time I pulled out of the site, gas was the last thing on my mind, and my truck's gauge had been sitting on the wrong side of a quarter tank since. I'd meant to stop on the way home. I didn't. That detail is going to matter in about 3 minutes. So does an email sitting unanswered in my inbox that week, paperwork from my brother's equipment lender, waiting on my signature as his co-signer, a favor I'd already agreed to, and just hadn't gotten around to finalizing yet. Let me back up. Here's how it started. It was 2:04 in the morning. I know the exact time because I looked at the clock the second Sophie's hand closed around my arm hard enough to wake me before her voice did. Ethan. Something in the single syllable of my name had me sitting up before I was even fully conscious. Sophie doesn't wake me at 2 a.m. for nothing. 34 weeks pregnant, and the woman had powered through morning sickness without complaint, worked a full shift the day her ankles swelled to twice their size, and once told me a contraction-strength backache was probably just a bad mattress. I'd learned over 12 years together that when Sophie says something's actually wrong, it's already been wrong for a while before she says it out loud. Something's wrong, she said. It's tight, low, and it's not letting up. It's been 15 minutes, maybe more. I flipped the lamp on. Her face had gone pale in a way I'd never seen on her before. Jaw tight, breathing shallow, and deliberate the way the birthing classes had taught her, except we weren't supposed to need that breathing for another 6 weeks. Okay, we're going, right now. I was already pulling on jeans, hopping on one foot to get the other leg through, hands not quite cooperating with the urgency my body wanted. Can you walk to the truck? I think so. She braced a hand against the nightstand, breathing through something. Ethan, it's too early. 6 weeks too early. I know. We're going to get you there. I grabbed her hospital bag from the closet, the one she'd packed 3 weeks ago, just in case, never imagining we'd actually need it this soon. I grabbed my keys off the dresser and felt the specific dread of a needle already resting near empty. I'd known it was low. I hadn't thought about it since Tuesday evening. Hadn't imagined I'd need a full tank at 2 in the morning 6 weeks before our daughter was supposed to exist. How far to Riverside on empty? I asked myself out loud, doing math I had no business doing at 2 a.m., with a pregnant woman gripping the doorframe behind me. Riverside Memorial was 11 miles. The gauge said maybe 20-25 if I was lucky, and drove gently, which wasn't exactly the plan with contractions 15 minutes apart and a truck I wasn't entirely sure would make it there in the first place. The 2 closest gas stations, both closed overnight, hadn't run 24 hours since the pandemic. The nearest open one was 9 miles in the wrong direction, which meant 18 miles round trip before we'd even started toward the hospital. I did the math twice, hoping it would come out different the second time. It didn't. We're not risking it, I said, mostly to myself. I need another car. I called my brother. Ryan lived 12 minutes from us, in the house our parents used to own before they moved to Sarasota, driving a nearly new pickup he'd bought that spring, a truck I happened to know had a full tank because he'd mentioned filling it up on his way home from a job that same afternoon. He picked up on the 4th ring, voice thick with sleep. Ryan, it's Ethan. I need your truck, right now. Sophie's in labor, 6 weeks early, contractions 15 minutes apart, and my gas tank's basically empty. I need you to either drive us or bring me your truck." There was a pause. Not the pause of a man waking up and orienting himself. A different pause. One I'd come to recognize by the end of that week for exactly what it was. Wait. Hold on. Slow down. A rustle of blankets. A yawn he didn't bother hiding. "Ethan, it's 2 in the morning. I'm aware of the time, Ryan. Sophie's in labor, and I need your truck. Look, I've got the Hendricks job first thing, 6 a.m. start, and I need actual sleep before that. Can't you just call an ambulance?" "An ambulance will take 20 minutes to get here, and then another 20 to get us there. I need a car right now, not a discussion. I mean, is it even a real emergency? People go to the hospital for false labor all the time. She's probably fine." Something in my chest went very cold, very fast. She's 6 weeks early and having contractions 15 minutes apart, Ryan. That is the definition of an emergency. Look, man, I get it, but that's not my emergency to handle. I've got work in 4 hours. I stood in my bedroom doorway, phone against my ear, Sophie watching me from the bed with an expression I didn't have time to fully register yet, and for a full second I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. "Say that again?" "You heard me. Call 911 if it's that serious. I can't be driving around at 2 a.m. before a 6 a.m. start." The line went dead before I'd even decided how to respond. Not slammed, just ended. The way a conversation ends when someone's already decided what they're not going to do. I stood there for a second, phone still against my ear, Sophie watching me from the bed, waiting for whatever I was going to say next. "Got it," I said to a phone that had already stopped listening. Not tired, not overwhelmed. Unwilling, dressed up neatly as a scheduling conflict. There's a difference, and apparently I'd needed 35 years of having a brother to finally see exactly where that line sat. That's not my emergency to handle. 5 plain words, and somehow they told me more about the next decade of holidays and favors than 35 years of being his brother ever had. I kept hearing them on a loop, even while I was dialing Teresa's number. I called Teresa Nguyen next door. Teresa had lived beside us for 6 years, since before Sophie and I even got married. 67 years old, retired after 31 years as a labor and delivery nurse at Riverside itself, the same hospital we were now racing toward. She kept her porch light on year-round out of habit, she'd told us once, because in her old job someone was always arriving in the dark needing help, and old habits like that don't retire just because you do. She answered on the second ring, already sounding awake, or awake fast, in the specific way people who spent decades on call learn to be. "Ethan, everything all right?" "Teresa, I need a huge favor. Sophie's in labor, 6 weeks early, contractions about 15 minutes apart, and my truck's nearly out of gas. Any chance you could drive us to Riverside?" No pause. "None. I'll pull the car around, give me 90 seconds, get her out on the porch, I'll bring the car right up to the steps. That's it. That's it, no conditions, no mention of what her own morning looked like." True to her word, she was in her driveway, engine already running, exactly 90 seconds later, still in the flannel robe she'd clearly thrown on over pajamas, hair not yet brushed, slippers swapped for actual shoes without a word wasted on it. She helped Sophie into the back seat herself, one hand under her elbow, the other bracing the doorframe, moving with the unhurried efficiency of someone who'd done this exact motion hundreds of times before, just usually inside a hospital instead of a driveway. The whole car felt calmer the second she got behind the wheel. The kind of calm you can't fake, only earn over 3 decades of nights just like this one. "How far apart now?" Teresa asked, pulling out of the driveway. 12 minutes, Sophie said, breathing through the tail end of one hand braced against the door. "Any bleeding? Any fluid?" "No. It's really low, and it's not easing up between them at all, like a pressure that won't let go." "Okay, that's good. That's useful information. How's the baby moving? Still active?" "A little," Sophie said. "Less than usual, maybe." Teresa glanced in the rearview mirror, something shifting behind her eyes, professional and calm at once. "Ethan, call ahead to Riverside. Tell them we've got a 34-weeker, contractions 12 minutes apart, painful and not easing between, and ask them to have someone from L&D meet us at the door instead of routing through general triage." Is something specifically wrong?" "Probably nothing that can't be managed," Teresa said, in a tone that told me she wasn't fully certain of that herself. but I'd rather they be ready and not need it than need it and not be ready. I made the call. My hands weren't entirely steady doing it. Teresa drove faster than her usual careful pace, but never recklessly, hands steady on the wheel, glancing at Sophie in the rear view every few seconds without ever taking her attention fully off the road. The streets were empty at that hour, every light green, like the town itself had decided to cooperate for once. We pulled into the ER bay at 2:31 a.m. A nurse was already waiting with a wheelchair, exactly the way Teresa had asked for. If you've been with us a while, you know these stories tend to turn somewhere nobody expects, and this one is no exception, so stay with me, because it's worth every minute of what's coming. They got Sophie back within 4 minutes. I sat in a stiff plastic chair in the family waiting area with Teresa beside me, still in her robe, hands folded in her lap, saying nothing, just present in a way that made the waiting bearable. A television mounted in the corner played a muted infomercial nobody was watching. I checked my phone twice, out of pure habit more than any real expectation. Still nothing from Ryan. "They'll come get you the second there's anything to tell you," Teresa said quietly, somewhere around the 20-minute mark, reading the question on my face before I'd asked it. Silence right now isn't bad news. It usually just means they're working, doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. At 3:52, a doctor came out. Dr. Alvarez, mid-50s, steady voice, the kind that made you believe whatever came next without needing to be convinced. "Mrs. Marsh is stable. What she's experiencing is consistent with placental abruption, a partial separation, caught early enough that we've got good options. Her vitals are strong, the baby's heart rate is strong, and we're going to keep monitoring closely, but right now, this is manageable. We're keeping her overnight for monitoring, likely tomorrow as well." He glanced at his chart. If this had gone another few hours without intervention, we could be having a very different conversation. He looked between me and Teresa. Whoever suggested calling ahead about the timing and the lack of relief between contractions, that made a real difference in how fast we moved. That's not always obvious to family. Teresa didn't say anything, just nodded once, the particular nod of someone who'd spent 31 years hearing exactly that sentence and had never quite gotten used to needing it said out loud. I got to see Sophie at 4:10. She looked exhausted, IV in her arm, monitor tracking 2 heartbeats instead of 1, but her color had come back. "You came," she said, voice thin but steady. "I mean, obviously you came. I just mean all of it. You got here. Teresa got here. Everyone just showed up." "I'll always come," I said, and meant it in a way that suddenly felt heavier than it ever had before that night. "Teresa was amazing," Sophie said. "The whole drive, she just knew exactly what to ask, what to say. I don't think I could have stayed calm without her. She used to do this for a living, 31 years. I know, I just didn't realize how much that would matter until tonight." She shifted against the pillow. "Where's Ryan?" she asked. "Did you call him?" I hesitated for exactly 1 second too long. "He had work in the morning," I said. Sophie's face did something complicated, something between disbelief and a kind of tired recognition, like a piece of information sliding into a slot that had been sitting empty for years, waiting. "That's it? That's the reason?" "That's the reason he gave me." She didn't say anything else about it that night. She didn't need to. Ryan called at 9:40 the next morning. I was still at the hospital, hadn't slept, hadn't showered, running on hospital coffee and adrenaline that had long since curdled into something closer to exhaustion. "Hey, everything okay? She's fine, right? Baby's fine?" "They're both stable. It was a partial placental abruption, Ryan. She could have lost the baby." "Oh man, okay, but she's fine now, right? See? This is what I mean. These things usually work out." "That's not the point, Ryan. I mean, I feel bad, obviously, but you're making it sound like I did something wrong. I said call an ambulance. That's a real option. You know, that's literally what it's there for. That's not me being unhelpful. An ambulance would have taken 40 minutes round trip on a night with contractions 15 minutes apart. Teresa got us there in under 30. Well, good thing Teresa was around then. A short laugh that had no humor in it. That's not the point. It's exactly the point, Ryan. Someone had to be there and it wasn't you. I mean, no harm done, right? I'm not trying to make light of it, you're acting like something actually happened and it didn't, so I don't really get why you're being weird about this. There it was. Not an apology, not even a real acknowledgement. Just minimization wrapped in false relief, the responsibility quietly repositioned back onto me, for having the audacity to still be upset about it. "So what do you want me to say?" Ryan asked, when I didn't respond right away. "Nothing right now. I want to hang up before this gets worse than it already is." "I'll talk to you later, Ryan," I said, and ended the call before it could go anywhere worse. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for the 2 in the morning moments, the ones that actually cost something, to reveal who they really are underneath the version they present at every family dinner. Ryan failed that test in under 90 seconds, and it took me exactly 1 week to decide what I was going to do about it. I didn't confront him that day, didn't post anything, didn't tell our parents, didn't even tell Sophie what I was thinking. I just drove home from the hospital Wednesday evening, sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, and pulled up an email thread I'd been meaning to respond to for 2 weeks. The email was still sitting there, subject line reading, "Equipment loan, final authorization needed," an attachment I hadn't opened since the day it arrived. 3 weeks earlier, Ryan had asked me to co-sign a $15,000 equipment loan for his landscaping business, a new commercial mower, and a trailer he needed to bid on bigger contracts. I'd agreed without hesitation at the time, the way you agree to things for family before you've had any reason not to. I sat there for a long while, cursor hovering over the attachment, not really reading it, just thinking about the sound of Ryan's voice saying, "That's not my emergency to handle," and the sound of his voice that morning saying I was being weird for still being upset. I thought about Teresa in her robe, 90 seconds flat, no questions asked. I thought about what it actually means to put your name on something for someone, what that signature is supposed to represent. I closed the laptop without responding that night. I already knew what I was going to do. I just needed a day to be sure it wasn't anger talking. It wasn't anger. Thursday morning, it was just clarity. I didn't send the signed paperwork back. Thursday morning, I called the loan officer, a woman named Patricia Odom at Fort Wayne Community Credit Union. "Miss Odom, it's Ethan Marsh. I'm the co-signer on file for Ryan Marsh's equipment loan. I need to withdraw my authorization." There was a brief pause, keys clicking on her end. "I can note that, Mr. Marsh. Let me just confirm where things stand. Since the loan hasn't disbursed yet and your final signature hasn't been submitted, withdrawing is straightforward on our end. No penalty to you, no complications on the paperwork already filed. Can I ask if there's an issue with the application itself?" "No issue with the paperwork," I said. "Just a change of mind about the arrangement." "That's your right as co-signer, any time at all before disbursement, no different from how it would work for any account holder in your exact position. I'll process that today. Mr. Marsh's loan officer will need to reach out to him about next steps, since without a co-signer, the application would need to be re-evaluated on his income alone." "Understood. Thank you for handling this quickly." "Of course, Mr. Marsh. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "No, that's everything." I hung up and sat at my kitchen table for a while afterward, not doing anything in particular, just letting the decision settle into something real, instead of something I'd only thought about the night before at 2 a.m., angry and exhausted, and half sure I'd regret it by morning. I didn't. If this story's landing with you, do me a favor before the ending, hit that subscribe button, and drop a comment telling me what you'd have done in Ethan's position. It genuinely helps this channel, and I read every single one. Ryan found out Friday afternoon. His loan officer called to inform him that the co-signer had withdrawn, and without a co-signer, the application didn't clear underwriting on his income alone. Ryan asked, according to what he told me himself weeks later, whether it was some kind of processing error, some mistake on the bank's end. He was told, plainly, that the withdrawal had come directly from the co-signer, by name, 2 days earlier. He called me 11 times that evening. I let every single one of the 11 go to voicemail, not out of strategy. I genuinely didn't have anything to say yet that wouldn't come out sharper than either of us needed. Did he really truly think none of it would ever catch up to him? The following Wednesday, exactly 1 week after that 2 a.m. phone call, Ryan showed up at my job site. I was standing near the framing crew reviewing a set of drawings with my foreman Marcus, when I saw Ryan's truck pull past the gate. No hard hat, no visitor badge, ignoring the sign-in clipboard entirely. He walked straight toward the trailer where I was standing, fast enough that a couple of the framers stepped out of his path, loud enough that half the crew looked up from what they were doing. "Ethan!" His voice carried across the whole site before he'd even reached me. Marcus glanced at me, one eyebrow raised, a silent question I answered with a small shake of my head. Not a threat, just my brother. You pulled the cosign, he said, before I'd even fully turned around, jabbing a finger toward me like it might make the words land harder. $15,000, Ethan. Gone. Just like that. You didn't even call me first. I need you to lower your voice, I said quietly. This is a job site, Ryan, not a parking lot. I don't care whose job site it is. You tanked my equipment loan over a ride to the hospital. I tanked it because you told me my wife's emergency wasn't yours to handle, so I decided your business loan wasn't mine to handle either. That's not the same thing at all. It's exactly the same thing, I said. You just didn't expect the math to run in the other direction. That's the part that's actually bothering you, Ryan, not the money. Marcus quietly stepped a few feet away, giving us room without leaving entirely, the way people do when they sense a conversation isn't meant for them, but might still need a witness. She could have lost the baby, Ryan. You said, and I'm quoting you exactly, you said, that's not my emergency to handle. Then you called the next morning and told me I was being weird for still being upset about it. I was half asleep, Ethan. I didn't mean it I was tired. I wasn't thinking straight. You know how I get. You were awake enough to ask if it was even a real emergency. You were awake enough to bring up your 6 a.m. start time before you ever asked if Sophie was okay, and that's the part I haven't been able to let go of. So this is what, payback? You're punishing me over a bad night's sleep? It wasn't a bad night's sleep, Ryan. It was my wife bleeding internally at 2 in the morning, and you asked if it was even real. He didn't have an answer for that. Just stood there in front of my crew, jaw working, glancing once at Marcus and the framers who were now very deliberately not watching, anger slowly draining into something that looked closer to fear. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm just done pretending you're someone I can count on, and I'm not putting my name on a $15,000 loan for someone I can't count on to answer a phone. That's not punishment, Ryan. That's just accuracy. I can talk to the bank, explain the situation. Maybe you could you reconsider? Just this once? You're asking me to reconsider something you didn't take 5 seconds to reconsider yourself at 2 in the morning. He had nothing to say to that. Just stood there, hands opening and closing at his sides, like he was searching for an argument that wasn't going to arrive. I already did reconsider, I said. That's exactly what Thursday was. She's my sister-in-law. That kid's my niece, Ethan. I know, I said. That's not in question. What's in question is whether you'll ever be the kind of person either of them can actually call on when it matters. Right now, the honest answer is no. That's not me being cruel, Ryan. That's just what last Tuesday told both of us, whether either of us wanted it to or not. He left without another word, truck pulling out through the gate faster than it needed to, gravel spitting from under his tires as he swung wide past the sign-in trailer. Marcus walked back over a minute later, didn't ask a single question, just handed me the drawings we'd been reviewing like nothing had happened. Marcus looked at me for a moment before he spoke. Family, was all he said. Yeah. Rough week then. He tapped the blueprint, giving me a beat to decide how much I wanted to say. I didn't say more, and he didn't push, which was one of the things I'd always appreciated most about the man. We still good on the east wall framing by Friday? We're good, I said, grateful, more than I let on, for a problem that had a straightforward answer for once. I called Sophie that evening, still at the hospital, for one more night of monitoring before they'd let her go home on bed rest. He came by the job site, I told her. I figured he might, eventually. She didn't sound surprised, just tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hospital bed. How'd it go? About how you'd expect. In front of half my crew, no less. Of course it was. She was quiet for a moment. You know what I keep thinking about. Teresa didn't hesitate for 1 second, didn't even ask what time it was. Ryan's known me for 6 years, sat at our wedding, and he asked if it was even a real emergency. Yeah, some people you don't have to wonder about, she said. That night just finally showed you which kind he was, and honestly, I think some part of you already knew before that. It just hadn't had a reason to matter yet. I sat with her a while that evening, not saying much, just being there, which was the only thing that had ever actually mattered in the first place. The room was quiet except for the steady beeping of the monitor, the hum of the hallway outside, a nurse's cart rolling past every so often, wheels squeaking faintly. Watching the monitor track two steady heartbeats side by side, I understood something I don't think I'll ever unlearn. It was never really about the gas tank, or the ride, or even the $15,000 sitting in an application that never closed. It was about who answers the phone the first time, without doing the math on what it cost them first. You find out who your family really is not on the easy Sundays, but on the nights that ask something of you at the worst possible hour. Sophie came home 4 days later, on modified bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy, closely monitored but stable. Teresa stopped by twice a week after that, ostensibly to check in, though I suspect she just liked having somewhere useful to put 31 years of instinct that retirement hadn't managed to switch off. She brought soup twice, insisted it was just something she had extra of, though nobody who's ever met Teresa believes she makes soup by accident. 5 weeks later, right on the adjusted timeline the doctors gave us, our daughter was born healthy, 7 pounds 2 ounces, 10 fingers and 10 toes, counted twice by a nervous new father, and Teresa was one of the first people we called, right after our own parents. Ryan never called again after that Wednesday. I never called him either. Some doors close so quietly you barely notice the moment it happens. You just notice, sometime later, how much steadier the house feels without them. If this one hit home for you, let us know in the comments, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.